Welcome to Brain Thunder, where we interview millennial entrepreneurs, founders, scientists, commentators, and everything in between, here to inspire and educate. With me today, I have Francis Pedraza, the CEO of Invisible Technologies, a productivity startup that allows its users to automate and outsource complex workflows. Francis, so good to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Martha.
Of course. Something that really stood out to me when we had our original call was your reluctance to be called a founder. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the way that I'm going to introduce you when I start this podcast. Mm-hmm. And you said, call me the CEO, but don't call me the founder. Mm-hmm. And everyone that joins this company is a partner, and everybody is into it. And we're doing this as a team and together as equals. And I love that. And I've never heard that when I spoke to any other founders. Sorry. Talk to me about this.
Words matter. There's magic in words. I love doing etymologies of words. So you could just type founder etymology, or Wikipedia has a cool dictionary called Wiktionary. So founder etymology, Wiktionary. And you can go back through the English to maybe the French or the German, to the Latin, to the Greek, to the, maybe sometimes it goes to, Sanskrit, and you go all the way back and think about what these words mean. So if everyone's using this term founder, we should think about what does it mean? And it refers to a historical moment. So it's some mythical moment 7 years ago. We just completed our 7th year as a company.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So on October 1st, 2015, the founding moment there was, and that's when all the value was created. So we should look at the company's cap table, and we should see that the founder owns the most, because all the value was created on October 1st, 2015. You see how this places greatness in the past.
Yeah.
Instead of putting the greatness in the present or greatness in the future.
I understand.
And so what we say at Invisible is the founding moment is always now. If you're at the company now, you're the founder or co-founder, and you can go ahead and use it. But it's not a term. It's a term that has great mythology in it. So it is a term I think about. I do think about myself as the founder of Invisible, a founder of Invisible. Today, right now, right this second. And I also want all of my partners to think the same way. So whenever the world tries to apply the term, I'm like, no, that's not the way we think here.
That makes sense. And I respect that. This is just something really new for me. And I was just super interested, and I love the way that you explained it. So I thought, what better than to ask you about this very thing during our podcast.
Oh, thank you.
So, of course. So businesses are increasingly relying on outsourcing and automation because of the efficiencies that they have. I want to understand a little better, how is Invisible Technologies helping with that, and how can you make companies be more efficient?
Yeah. So I'm going to try to bridge the first and the second question, because it seems like a big leap between thinking about the meaning of words and the title founder versus the title CEO, which is an actual, job, versus a mythology. And then now we're talking about outsourcing and automation, which seems to have nothing to do, but they do. So there's a Camus line. It goes something like this, not the exact quote, but basically you've got to be the revolution. So if you want to do something great, you have to be great. You have to challenge yourself. And what does that look like? Well, everyone loves talking about Elon Musk, right? Yeah. Is he overcommitted? Is he overstretched? Is he doing too many things? The man simply refuses to acknowledge limits that the rest of us keep. And so I have to, I want to sleep every night. I want to work out every day. I want to have a social life. I definitely shouldn't start a second company. I definitely shouldn't start a third company.
Yeah.
I definitely shouldn't, double my performance goals for the year. So we limit ourselves in all these interesting ways. And the reason why I started Invisible is that I always felt the main limitation on me personally was operational resources. So I think of this as almost like a riddle. So if you hire an assistant, in 1 hour, you can give the assistant 10 hours of work. You can give the assistant 100 hours of work. You can give the assistant 1,000 hours of work. You can give the assistant a year of work in 1 hour, depending on how good they are.
Yeah.
If they're truly world-class, like chief of staff, you can delegate at a very high level. Right. There's a framework called levels of delegation. So you see there's this asymmetry between creativity and execution.
Right.
You can have enough ideas in the shower, then you can do in your whole life.
Yeah.
So when people say, success is 99% about execution and only 1% about ideas, they're referring to the asymmetry here. Ideas are so powerful, in fact, that a single idea could take many years to follow through on. Invisible is kind of the Iron Man suit I wanted for myself, because I wanted to constantly grow the number of creative things I could do. So when we started the company seven years ago, the very first version of the business failed, but it was close to the spirit of the idea, which was it was a $10,000 a month service for CEOs only. And you would have your very own invisible assistant.
Wow.
You can name it whatever you want. You can name it Wonder Woman, Superman. I named mine John Keats after the English poet. And behind the scenes, there would be the whole team. And we were just literally they could delegate as much as they want. And then we would try to get the work done. And
what was difficult about that?
We were spending like $20,000 a month for every $10,000 a month we were receiving. We ran out of money quickly. It was uneconomic. We were not efficient yet, and we didn't have all the technology we have today, but we were focused on individual productivity. So how do you scale an individual? How do you give a normal CEO the type of support and leverage that like an Elon Musk gets, or a Tim Cook gets, or the President of the United States gets? These high-level executives, they don't just have a chief of staff or a chief of staff and an assistant. They have a whole team around them.
Right.
So that was the original dream of Invisible, so to speak. What we ended up becoming was a very futuristic outsourcing and automation platform. We ended up realizing that the only way to get work done for our clients was to take the delegation and turn it into a process and break that process into steps and get more and more efficient at executing those steps. And that meant starting with automation, trying to automate as many of the steps as possible. And then that also meant building a workforce. So we have 1,000 workers now on our digital assembly line, and they're in 60 countries around the world. It's a fully secure platform. And so now our clients are companies. So, for example, you're familiar with DoorDash and Grubhub and all these on-demand food delivery companies. Okay, so we service a lot of these on-demand food delivery companies where they will have us digitize restaurant menus and onboard restaurants onto the platform so that when you look at the app, all the data is in there and all of it's correct and the back end works. When you do that, for example, digitizing every restaurant menu in the world, that is a huge scale. But when you have a busy executive who has you book a flight for them, there's no scale at all. You just do it once.
It really depends on what the task itself is.
Yes.
I wonder if it changes per industry, the level of automation that you need and the level of efficiency that you're trying to achieve. And how can you measure against that? Do you have a different plan for different industries, or is it one size fits all?
Yeah, we support many different industries, many different functions. We help real estate companies find homes to buy by, exploring various websites and finding, using their criteria, almost like we're on their acquisitions team, because all this is just like a search process. And it's the same. We help recruiting teams run searches and reach out to candidates and gather candidates and put them through their funnel. We're helping one of the biggest AI companies in the world build and tag data sets and build machine learning models. And then we're exploring helping an airline submit reports to the FAA. The guts of businesses have operational problems in them. You would never know on the outside until you really get into them. And you realize that these companies are either outsourcing them to a traditional outsourcing company that is not a technology company that will bill them by the hour. So when you bill by the hour, what's your incentive? Is to be as inefficient as possible, bill as many hours as possible. So that's the way outsourcing 1.0 worked. And so there's something like $70 billion spent on business process outsourcing in the United States every single year. And these are, there are all these billion-dollar companies that will literally have offices in Manila or New Delhi, and it's commodity labor, just billing by the hour. And Invisible's coming in and saying, meet us on Zoom, screen share, show us the work. We will break it into steps, automate as many as possible, run the rest of them on our digital assembly line, and we will charge you by the unit instead of by the hour. So as we get more efficient, we can lower unit prices over time, and it just gets better, faster, and cheaper. So we're kind of coming in like Netflix versus Blockbuster, and saying
economies of scale. So of course, there's a really big advantage in choosing you as opposed to wanting to be charged hour per hour. Do you think, however, there's any limitations currently on automation?
Oh yeah, there are, exactly. And that's actually the other side of the equation. So, we are disrupting two industries. We're disrupting outsourcing and we're disrupting automation. So on the outsourcing side, they bill by the hour and they're not tech companies. On the automation side, the technology industry's solution to everything is to build more tools. And so this begs a question, if there's an app for everything, why isn't everything perfect yet? All these automation tools take a lot of time and energy to set up and use. Maintain. And then each one maybe automates 2% of your company's operations. So then you have to add this one and this one and this one and this one, and then there's stuff that can't be automated. So if you want an end-to-end solution, clients don't care about tools. They care about solutions. And so if they want the end-to-end solution, what are they really going to stitch together? Like we use 200 different automation tools. Are they really going to stitch together 200 automation tools, build their own automation team? We have our own automation team, and have an operations team that can maintain any SLA or performance requirement. Are they really going to build that in-house? Absolutely not. We sort of give you the best of both worlds. We'll use the automation tools for you, and we'll automate the steps, and we'll run the actual process, the parts that can't be automated, and we're gonna align our incentives so that everyone's incentives are aligned around efficiency.
I love that. That sounds incredible, and you really are solving a big problem. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Of course, I want to talk a little bit about innovation in the technology industry in general. And I know we've spoken a little bit about this offline, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on how do you see innovation right now in the tech industry, and how do you think the game is being played, and is the same game being played over the last few years? And if not, how is it changing in your eyes?
So notice what parties you get invited to. There are 4 types of parties I've noticed in the technology industry. The first is I'm starting a company. The second is I raised a round. The third is I sold my company. And the fourth is I IPO'd. I think of this as like a clockwise game. So you start a company, you raise money, you run large losses on product and growth to generate enterprise value. You're not profitable, you're losing money. And then you raise another round, a bigger round, and you run bigger losses on product and growth to generate more enterprise value. And then you raise a bigger round, run bigger losses. A lot of these tech companies aren't profitable even by the time they IPO. They're like, oh, we'll be profitable in 10 years at some point once we're huge.
But not right now.
And so how do you make money doing this? If you're a shareholder, you either sell secondary before the acquisition, or you sell the company, there's an acquisition, or you go public and you sell it to the public. In all of these scenarios, you're thinking in maximum 5 to 7 year long timeframes, and you're thinking about selling it to the next person. And a lot of these companies end up 70% owned by investors, 20% owned by the founders, the management team, the partners, and maybe 10% owned by everybody else. So that's the game. And there's an industrial complex. Like venture capital firms are looking for a certain profile of company. When they invest in a Series A and they give you the legal docs, there's like certain sort of assumptions around board control and protective provisions and how the preferred stock gets treated versus the common. And it's not just an industrial complex. All industrial complexes are cultural industrial complexes. It becomes a mindset, a set of assumptions that drive behaviors. So for example, you hire a growth team and they're going to focus on the top line and not on the bottom line. They're not going to think about profitability. Yeah. So it trickles down into day-to-day work in all of these ways. Invisible decided to become profitable. We've been profitable for about 18 months now. And we are still growing very, very fast. We've tripled revenue the last couple years. This year, it looks like we're going to triple again. And our bottom line is growing much faster than our top line. Next year, for example, if we double our top line, we may 6x our bottom line because certain costs are not scaling with revenue. So we're generating more and more profit. Now, we are going to reinvest some of that profit back in the business, but we're also using profit and debt to buy out our investors. And so by the end of next June, we have purchase agreements in place to buy, we'll have 80% of the company. 80% of the company will be in the hands of the team, because I'm taking that equity from investors, think of them as capital partners, and putting it into the hands of labor partners. I might sound like a trade unionist or something. It just makes sense that in a capital efficient company, the majority of the value is created by the labor, not the capital. And so it doesn't make sense for the company to be 70% owned by investors. It makes sense for the company to be 80% owned by the team. And we're negotiating actually for that last 20% to be bought out as well. And this creates a virtuous cycle where when I'm now hiring talent, I'm not pitching them as an employee. That's another word we don't use at Invisible. We don't use the word founder. We also try to avoid the word employee. The word we use is partner. And I'm saying you can go work for a big tech company and they'll offer you, sushi and free dental, and that's nice. But at Invisible, we're trying to give you a very meaningful equity stake and aligned incentives around performance. And we'll help you build generational wealth and set up your family office. And like, for example, we actually lend money to partners in cashless loans so that they can exercise their stock options and turn them into actual stock. And we're doing all these things in helping everyone at the company with financial planning, almost like encouraging them to think very long term about building their wealth. This is a completely different pitch, for hiring. We're really committed to meritocracy. You can, climb the ladder at the company, but also we're opening the door for partners to eventually start their own companies inside of the group. So we're creating a holding company, and Invisible is not going to be the only company. We're going to allow them to go start their own company because we have so many entrepreneurs in one company.
So you're really just training them. You're really just molding them into future entrepreneurs. That's incredible. I love that.
Yes.
That is truly, to me, that truly encompasses the idea of a partner.
Yep.
Truly just encouraging everyone to do their own thing and be their own boss in a way.
Yeah.
Which I love. I think that's incredible. You don't see that often. So something definitely you should be very proud of. So Invisible Technologies boasts a very strong culture. We've talked about not using the term founder, not using the term employee, everybody's a partner. It's like a very meritocratic type of structure.
Yeah.
I want to understand from your point of view, what's the difference between a strong culture and then a cult? Not saying that your company is a cult, obviously, but I just want to understand a little more. We've seen in the past a number of companies that boast a very strong immersive culture, and next thing you know, like we saw with WeWork, for example, we're walking into full-blown cult-like territory.
Yeah.
Because you have kept the balance, and I want to understand what is the difference between those two concepts.
Yeah. So to be clear, I have no desire to be the next Adam Newman, and I have no desire to ever build a cult. So as it relates to words, my name is Francis, and part of the etymology of Francis is freedom. So I would never want to impose dogma on anyone else. And if I was to define the distinction between cult and culture, the essence of a cult is the loss of individuality, right? So you think about Athens versus Sparta. So Sparta is the quintessential cult, and Athens was much more of a culture of individuals. But both had weaknesses and strengths. I don't have a name, you don't have a name, we're just Spartans, and we are prepared to die for the glory of Sparta. All of Sparta is prepared to die. We want to die for glory. We're living for glory. We're building our whole society around this universal ideal. And so then it actually works. Like 300 Spartans defied, maybe it wasn't 1 million Persians, maybe it was like hundreds of thousands. But the point is, they did something at Thermopylae that was truly extraordinary and beautiful, and you should respect that there is some power to it. So what do you get? Well, there's pros and cons. With a cult, in exchange for the loss of individuality, you get this super intense cohesion. And so like a very light version of that is I do business with a lot of friends. A lot of my partners started out as my friends, and we built really great relationships. We got to know each other over dinner and drinks and vacations and what have you. And then at some point, you get a really good sense for their strengths and weaknesses, and you have deep conversations. And then you say, hey, would you be interested in working together with me? And then if they join, now you've got a complicated friendship. There's risk. You're blending your personal life and your professional life, and it's becoming all more gray. And there's pros and cons to that. Like you then can have a much stronger, partnership as a result, because you really know each other and you care about each other. And that care is mutual and felt. I want to acknowledge the power of a cult to create incredible unity and incredible performance. But the con is obviously that cults can become really scary. The loss of individuality isn't great. Invisible does not have doctrine, but we try to ask some key questions that are never going to be answered, but they're sort of key. One question is, how do you get the best of individualism and encouraging people to have their own points of view and to have their own goals and dreams and life plans and philosophies and religions and personal life that's like, theirs and is, authentic to them? And how do you also build a team that's coherent and cohesive and strong and united? We have this principle called minimum viable alignment.
How do you define that?
What is the minimum number of things we have to really agree on to work together? So in the next 15 months, the company has to execute on an actual quarterly strategy. Every quarter, there are certain objectives that need to get done. By the end of next year, the income statement should look like this. So how are we going to get there? So we definitely need to agree on that. But even within that, there's room for disagreement because the plan can probably be improved. Minimum viable alignment allows for a lot of room for dialogue and exploring questions of values. The other thing that's key to not building a cult is giving people liquidity. So going back to money, right? Yeah. So it's like, we're giving more and more equity to our team, but next year is going to be the first year that we are going to be providing liquidity to the team. So we bought back 13.5% of the company for $5 million last year. This year, so far, we've bought back an additional 32 investors. By the end of next June, we'll be 80% owned by the team. So we've been buying back a lot of investors, but we haven't been giving any liquidity to the team. So next year is the first year that everyone in the company will be able to sell stock. So I'll be able to sell stock, and maybe I'll have an apartment as nice as yours.
I love that. That's amazing.
But in exchange, if you leave the company, you can only hold on to your stock for a maximum of 3 years before the company has a call option to buy you at the most recent price. So that way we don't become a gerontocracy. Who owns the company? People who used to work here 10 years ago. No, we want to say who owns the company? The people who are here today, but constantly recycling stock. We're buying it back and giving it back to the people who are here so that everyone's still a founder. But you can sell, and we encourage, it's okay to sell. You don't have to, it would be a cult if we said the stock will be worth something someday, you should never sell it, and you should
stick here and not go anywhere.
Yeah, never go anywhere, and have no money outside of minimize. It's not the philosophy.
Absolutely not. And I was going to ask about management style, because I love your management style. I think I've met very few CEOs who have that type of meritocratic outlook. I think it's truly unique.
Thank you.
And I can just see how passionate you are and how passionate you feel about truly empowering every single one of your employees to start their own thing, run their own family office, do this.
Yes.
So you truly are a mentor. It truly is like a school, right? You go to business colleges, you do the best, you become the best, and then you may decide to move on.
Yeah.
And that doesn't scare you.
It's intimidating in the right way, humbling. The best automation company in the world should be the best training company in the world. There are actual practical business model reasons why we need to get good at training. That's bottoms up training for our agents. But even for our partners, it's the same philosophy. Almost like the president has term limits, we think about every role in the company as having term limits. So my goal as CEO of Invisible is not just success squared, which is compounding success and trying to make this grow exponentially and become, generate billions of dollars of revenue per year. Not just success squared, but succession. Succession problems are tricky, and the only way you can do it is by constantly thinking about how to take off hats. How do I do what I'm doing, master it, get good at it, and then hire someone, train them, make them my protege, and have them ultimately be even better than me at the role, and then step back, watch them do it, and mentor and coach them. And then you have to do this very uncomfortable thing, which is sit in the void. Like there will be some period where you're kind of like unemployed, even though you're employed. You're in your job and you're getting paid, and they're doing what you used to do, and it's like, what should I do now? You're like staring at the ceiling, and it's in those periods of time when you're staring at the ceiling and you don't know what you should do next, that your biggest and best ideas end up coming to you in those moments. And then you've got a new job, and guess what? You've got to master it, hire, train, coach, and then abstract out. So this is kind of like there's your job and your meta job. And the meta job is to, work yourself out of a job. It's to automate yourself out, and we call this abstraction.
So you do see yourself at some point stepping down?
Stepping up. I plan on working as long as I'm healthy, as long as I have the faculties to do so, my whole life until I retire. But I'm a very motivated person, so I think I'm going to be motivated even in decades to just this incredible time to be alive, and there's like an infinite number of opportunities in the world.
But this doesn't mean that you'd be forever the CEO
exactly.
of technology.
And it's actually not. So I think of it almost like an oath of office. Like I swore an oath. I have fiduciary responsibilities legally. And I think of that as sort of an implicit oath that all CEOs take, and actually all people at companies take, which is very simple. I, Francis Pedraza, intend to do what is in the long-term best interest of the company. The long-term best interest of the company it's not necessarily the same thing as the short to medium-term best interests of the shareholders today or of the partnership today. In other words, you need vision. A company is a living thing.
Right.
And it should always evolving.
And developing.
Yeah.
And it seems like you have a pretty good grasp of that, which is great. This is all that I have for today.
Amazing.
It was so
great
having you. Thank you so much. And please like and subscribe. We'll be back soon. Thank you.
Yeah. It's that new age, ain't it something special? Yeah. We gon' change the game. We